Show. My name is Brendan.
I'm Franco.
And it is season dos. Season 2. We did it, everybody. We did it. Woo! I don't have any confetti. If I did, woo! I'm throwing papers. I'm that excited. Season 2, thank you. You find people that watch us on YouTube, on Amp Media. You did it.
Yeah, we were renewed. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you want a graphic already? You did it. Okay.
I want a graphic that just flashes you did it.
Okay.
No exclamation point, no period, just you did it.
It's very Dora the Explorer, but I like it. Yeah, so AMP renewed us. They did it in the least exciting way possible. I got an email that basically just said, you have your slot still. Congratulations. No negotiation, just a basic, hey, by the way, you have a week left in programming. Here's a new contract. So,
number one, baby. Number one. We did it. We did it, America. We did it. So let's give the people and Amp Media what they are paying $0 for, which is a full-fledged show. So we got a lot to talk about. We've had a little bit of a break. That was on me. I had guests in my studio, aka the second bedroom of the apartment. My in-laws were in town. This is where they slept. I couldn't record. I'm sorry. It happens. I'm sorry, Franco. Publicly, I apologize to you. I'm sorry.
I forgive you. It did give us the chance to release a animated cartoon we made 2 years ago, which surprisingly has some of the highest views in our show's history. So
yeah,
there you go.
That was great. I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was like a little trip down memory lane.
We've come a long way in the 7 years, 8 years we've been doing the show, I think. Or is it almost 9 years?
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
9? That's not 9.
Is it? I think it's pretty close to 9, isn't it?
I think it's more like 5.
Semantics. Maybe it's 5.
I think it's more like 5
okay.
At the end of the day.
Half decade.
But that's all right. Half a decade.
Yeah.
Half a decade of excellence. But anyway, all right. So we got to get right into the show. We got a lot to cover. AMP hasn't renewed, while renewing our show, has not extended our time. So we're still at a half hour. If you want an hour, we're good at half hour.
Yeah.
No, we could probably do an hour. No, we did a half hour on radio.
We could do an hour, but let's get through season 2 first, and then the more our fans write, shout out to the 2 fans that did write Amp Media, who campaigned for us.
Megan?
We'll just have to have the 2 of you write longer letters about an hour show, and we'll go forward from there.
Wasn't Megan one of the fans that wrote?
Megan was one of the fans.
Shout out, Meg.
Yeah. Mr. Stewart Shepard or Smiley, I think. Someone we don't know.
We got to figure out that name.
Yeah, wrote in for us. So, Stewart, thank you for your
Stewart.
Friendship to the show. You'll get your own friend of the show bleep right now.
Friend of the show.
Yep.
Friend of the show, Stewart.
Yep.
And friend of the show, Meg. Let's put that in like the corner.
Okay.
Friend of the show, Meg.
Meg will get a small
for like
box
a minute.
Up here.
Small box for a minute.
A minute, okay.
And then because we know Meg for a long time, and Meg was arguing via you about my shirt selection on one episode.
Yeah. This is the kind of really quality TV you can expect. We do our production notes while live on air, and so you're getting the full experience. This is like a behind the music while the music's still playing.
And I wore an extra tight shirt. Check that. Look at that sleeve. Look at that sleeve. That's super tight.
All right.
Shout out LA Fitness. Not a sponsored, but should be. This is what I'm paying for right here. LA Fitness. Anyway, all right. Let's get into some serious stuff. We were being silly. We'll get into some serious things. Obviously, while we were gone, a heck of a lot happened in the NFL. So instead of spending hours that we could recapping all of it, we'll just focus on what is now the prevalent story, which is after all of the unity and kneeling during the initial protest. Well, and I want to be careful because, again, the protest, as we've said many times, was started by Colin Kaepernick against police brutality, and was more, and that's what it was for. And then it turned into where by kneeling you are disrespecting America and the flag and the troops and the police officer, and it turned into where all of a sudden it was being lumped into something that it wasn't initially meant to be. And jump in if I'm not putting this correctly, Franco.
I mean, I guess that was the uproar. Yeah,
Right.
kind of lost in all of the everything, the Twitter from our president and the angry Facebook messages, the hate mail I got, yours truly got hate mail,
Yeah.
was that the kneeling was a sign of protest about police brutality in America, which is an increasingly large problem. And yes, it's not that all police are corrupt or violent, but there are enough instances now where we have to, as a society and community, react to that. And that was the purpose of it. And kneeling, honestly, okay, we won't actually get into the whole thing. My stance will always be, and as a veteran, I can say something. I think I earned that much. Kneeling in protest something like this doesn't bother me. It never will. I'm sorry. I get why some people are bothered by it, and that's your opinion, you're right. But when we get into the whole idea of name calling and degrading those individuals who choose to protest in that way, aren't we just taking 10 steps back to the civil rights movement and all the violence perpetrated against protesters there and the restaurant and everything else? Like, we're, whatever, you don't agree with it, you don't have to agree with it. All protests aren't made for you. But respect that people have the right to protest and respect the meaning of the protest and don't lose the point, I guess. That's the biggest thing.
And I agree with everything you said. I mean, I have no problem with it. I think it's healthy. It's part of what is, in my opinion, part of the democratic process. It's just that's what you and I were raised on in terms of the history books that we read and in terms of, where we are today as a country and the civil rights movement. So to me, it didn't bother me. But what ended up happening was you had this weird, like you alluded to, where the president of the United States was tweeting about this. Then you had the reaction on Sunday, the following Sunday, where you would have owners and players kneeling or standing with linked arms. And then you have Jerry Jones, who found a way, and I was listening to sports radio, and it was like Jerry Jones is probably the only owner that methodically thought about this, where kneeling before the anthem and then standing up for the anthem. So you had the quote unquote best of both worlds, because it looked like Jerry was all in on the protests and being supportive, but the reality was he really wasn't. He was just finding a middle ground so that he could maneuver between both sides. Now it's come out today that he actually, what ironically enough was a fake story that was being perpetrated on Facebook, that Jerry Jones said you have to stand up, and everyone's like, oh, that's crazy, that's fake. And then it turned out this week that's actually something he told the team, that they best be standing, otherwise he would not play them, or they should not be played. And now there's a rumor that the NFL is actually considering putting together a rule that you have to stand during the national anthem, which to me is kind of crazy, because it's not something that, in my opinion, should be legislated at that level by the NFL. It's going to make it worse, because what happens when you have a player kneel? Because that player is going to then test the system, and if that player gets suspended or fined, then you're going to have the NFLPA probably paying for that fine and then also suing the NFL. And then what happens if you have someone at the stature of an Aaron Rodgers that kneels? Are you going to suspend and fine Aaron Rodgers? That'll be interesting to see what the NFL does in that matter. I think it's one thing if you want to target somebody that is a backup quarterback. It's a whole other thing if all of a sudden your star players, the people that people pay to see, are taking a knee, and then what are you going to do in that situation?
Yeah, you just said a lot. So, yes, the legislation by the NFL is going to backfire. I understand that David Silver has expressed that the NBA has a similar policy. That hasn't been tested yet, and I think it will be tested. I think the idea to legislate it is the owners reacting and trying to exert control over something they have no control over. And again, as for the NFL, as we've covered for the last 5 years running, it's a misstep, it's tone deaf, it misses the point, it's alienating a big part of the players who play in the league who have real concerns about this, and it's wrong. And I'm not embarrassed to say that, and it's the wrong move, and taking away the ability of someone to speak their mind isn't right. And that's just my moral belief. Obviously, there's a whole business side of it, that they're employees, so yes, you can do this and everything else, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I wish someone in Jerry Jones' life at some point would sit him down and say that exact phrase. just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
Right.
this is where we're at. And unfortunately, it's taking something that's usually really fun to talk about. We always catch up on fantasy and other things like that, and it's turned into something that's not fun to talk about. And yeah, and it's, I don't know how to express it. Just they need to back away from this. They need to leave it how it is. If they really don't like people kneeling during it, you know what? Go to the people you have contracts with in television and tell them to cut away.
Yeah.
Because that's business side, right? But you're not encroaching on somebody's rights, and that's the biggest thing. So that's my solution, personally.
The thing that also is just gross is that Jerry Jones is not the pillar of moral behavior, and to have him come out and say that and be so righteous with his anger when it was about maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when pictures came out of him clearly drunk out of his mind, taking very suggestive pictures with women who are not his wife. And that got online, and then nothing happens. Who knows how many deals, backroom deals that he's been involved with when it comes to money and to negotiating and to propping up Roger Goodell as commissioner and acting like via negotiations, penalties and taking away players' money. I mean, again, and to have him come out and make a quote unquote a stand, it's kind of ridiculous. And I think this is just their way of trying to stifle like a fire blanket, just throw something on it. Hopefully it goes away, but it's not. I think this is just going to exacerbate the issue, and we're going to see it more often than not. And again, if it does happen, you're right. It does take something that's fun that you and I enjoy, that you and I have bonded over throughout the years, and it does kind of dampen that fun, and it just kind of makes it another. It's not necessarily a refuge. It's more just, all right, now we have to have these conversations, especially the show. Again, the show started in New York, and the radio one was like fairly lighthearted, and then all of a sudden things converged where I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to talk about it, but it has made the show, even in this little very microcosm of a discussion, the show has changed dramatically because of the way and the reactions of major sports and how they're trying to handle this and their lack of handling.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, in some ways, it's a greater analogy towards the way our country works. The NFL is losing money because of the protests, so they're going to legislate a way to make sure they don't lose money. Because again, they are a business, and that's something you can't forget. Secondly, you have a situation where you have 31 white men that are extremely affluent and are quite removed from the culture that's being protested, making a decision for the whole. And that's a problem, and it's going to be a problem for a long time, and that's why the NFLPA exists, and hopefully that wins out. So stay tuned, I guess. I don't want to talk about it any more than we should. We'll talk about it another time.
Of course.
But, yeah, it shouldn't happen. I don't think it will. Hopefully NFLPA wins out, and Jerry Jones is officially not a friend of the show. So, sorry, Jerry.
Not a friend.
You're out. And there's
Out.
no amount of money you could pay us to get you back on. So, deuces.
No. Deuces. Let's move on to actual NFL game news, and let's talk. And actually, Franco, I have a question to ask you.
Okay.
Who is Roger Lewis Jr., DeVaris King, Travis Rudolph, and Ed Egan?
So, those are all Giants wide recievers.
Right.
If you don't, so
and
Rudolph
not just wait. Yeah, go ahead.
is the internet sensation who was the player photographed eating lunch with the autistic child. Great story there. Glad he's getting a chance, but you're kind of really highlighting the problem with the Giants. They have no wide receivers right now. Marshall's out for the season. Odell Beckham's out for the season. And as much as Odell Beckham really annoys me with his antics, that was hard to watch. And sometimes we tend to forget as fans that these people are people too. And that's one very young man's dreams kind of being halted for a year. And so we wish him the best, despite his net kicking and everything else. But yeah, so they're in a situation now where hopefully Sterling Shepard's back in the next 2 weeks. And otherwise, it's going to be the new era of Giants wide receivers, perhaps.
Two of which just came off the practice squad. So, and this is sort of, Franco, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we've documented this before. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to watching sports, but I don't recall a time in my recent history where this has happened, where you have all three of your starting wide receivers go out in one game. And I think that was the most disturbing part of it. It was just like, this is insane. And again, for a Giants team that, for all intents and purposes, the media in the preseason was talking about how they've finally done it. They've restocked. They're gonna be great. They made it to the playoffs last year. They're back in it again. They're 0-5, and they're in the basement. So there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. I don't know if there's any joy for Giants fans for the rest of the season besides looking ahead at the draft, because I think we'll talk about them in a bit, but the Jets were the ones that in New York, or at least, were tagged to be the ones on the march to 0-16. But I think the Giants have a pretty strong possibility of going 0-16. I know that's extreme right now. We're only in week 5. We're heading into week 6, but I think it's possible.
So it is possible. I think the bright spots for you are Wayne Gallman, terrific rookie running back, and maybe Davis Webb gets some play, because if Eli keeps getting nailed like that over and over again,
Right.
he's not going to be around for 16 weeks. And moreover, at what point do you draw the line for respect for this guy that's done so much for you, but is there a reason to put him on the line for the rest of the year when there's no shot at the playoffs? Why not save him for one more year, kind of shield him from hits? We'll see what happens. But I think we'll see Eli until he gets hurt, and then we'll see Davis Webb, and we'll see what happens there.
But the march is on now for the New York Giants to 0-16. Speaking of the Jets, we oddly enough have a matchup that is actually interesting with the Jets and the Patriots, where both coming in 2-3, and whoever wins would be the number one in the AFC East, which is kind of crazy because again, the Jets were not even supposed to be part of the conversation.
Yep.
They keep winning. And now you have the Patriots, whose defense is in shambles for the most part and not really doing a great job. Got a little bit better, I guess, in the last game, but still not great. And Gronkowski can't seem to stay healthy or play consistent games back to back. And so this sets up like this is sort of like it's like a train wreck almost. It's like it's a game that I'll probably want to peek at, but I'm embarrassed to say I'm watching it.
Yeah. Unfortunately for the Jets, they're going to lose.
Yep.
The teams that have kind of taken advantage of the bad defense of the Patriots have had a lot of offensive firepower. As much as Robbie Anderson's going to be a good receiver down the line, his quarterback throwing to him is Josh McCown. Like, it's just not going to work out. Austin Seferian-Jenkins is burned out in Tampa. A lot of potential, not a lot of pop. I mean, Bilal Powell, who is the bright spot as a running back, is going to be injured next week. So, I mean, it's going to be a blowout. That's my prediction. Fearless prediction, Patriots blow the Jets out. Sorry, Jets. I'd love to see you win, though. I'm rooting for them.
This has like the makings of like a 45-2 Patriots victory. Like there's going to be a weird safety in the very early part of the game where you're going to be like, oh, the Jets got this, and then the Patriots are going to destroy them. That's what I feel like is setting up. You're going to have this one sliver of hope early on in the game, and then it's going to be crushed if you're Jets.
Yeah. And speaking of blowouts, it makes me kind of think about something that happened this past weekend, because we don't talk about the learning curve enough.
No.
Which is the official league of this show. Brendan and I played each other, and despite Brendan putting up the biggest score he's put up all year,
yeah, I know.
I handed him a 50-point loss. So, sorry, Brendan.
It happens.
Yeah.
You had 5 touchdowns from Watson, so
That
I can't
more
really
proves the
compete
point.
against that.
The waiver wire is your best friend. Watching
Yep.
trends got me Watson. That's how we're here. So pay attention to your waiver wire. Pick up those players before they get hot. That way you have a chance of, blowing out someone like Brendan O'Brien, esteemed radio host and TV host. That's all.
I'm going to leave now.
Yep.
I'm going to leave. I'm sad.
Okay.
But in general, it's been like a weird. We'll touch on it briefly. Does it feel like a weird season to you, Franco, where everybody's predictions and the Oakland Raiders are in there that are terrible. The Giants are terrible. Steelers are not great. You had the Dolphins that prior to the first injury to quarterback were like, we'll just get Jay Cutler, and then that's been terrible. It's a weird. There are very few games that are worthy, I think, of holding national attention. It's just there's a murderer's row of terrible games at 1 o'clock slot, and then you get maybe a bright spot every now and then at the 4 o'clock. And even the Sunday night marquee games have been absolutely for the most part, atrocious, and it just seems to be no end in sight before the flex rules start. So, do you have that same sense that this is just a weird year?
I think it's a weird year. I think a lot has overshadowed the league this year, to give it a weird feeling. But don't forget that parity is a big part of why the league's successful. And in the average year, you have 4 teams that made the playoffs that don't every season. So I don't think it's different in that way. I do think some of the injuries have thrown out a lot of predictions kind of off-kiltered. And then I think the Patriots being not bad, but not being as good as we thought is giving this whole season a weird cue. That's how the year started off, right? This vaunted defense that added Coney Ealy, but then cut Coney Ealy, and everything else. They had Brandon Cooks, but haven't figured out how to use him yet. I think starting off that way is giving it a weird tinge. And while I've enjoyed this season watching it, I will say that this is how you lose the casual fan when you don't have that same brand recognition over and over again.
Let's move over because we talked a little bit about it, but fantasy. So now's the time. Everybody looks forward to it. Who is your buy low this week?
So I'm buying, speaking of the Patriots, look at that segue, Mike
Nice.
Gillislee, running back for the Patriots. Despite the fact he hasn't scored in 3 weeks, he's averaged 12 touches in a high-powered offense. And if any one of those passing plays has been tackled on the one, Gillislee's going to punch in. In a world where we don't have necessarily number one running backs anymore, having a running back that's guaranteed at goal line touches and is involved in a high-power offense is definitely worth investing in now. So get that person while they're nervous. And then on the wide receiver side, in case you lost an Odell, look for Alshon Jeffrey. He hasn't scored huge amounts, but Carson Wentz is looking really fantastic. And up to this point, Jeffrey's kind of faced the murderer's row of cornerbacks. He had Marcus Peters, Janoris Jenkins, Patrick Peterson. The schedule gets much better moving forward. So if you can sneak him in, grab him.
And who are you selling high right now?
The Dolphins, Devontae Parker. And here's the caveat to this. Both these players are fantastic players in real football. But fantasy football is a very different world. It's all about numbers, percentages, and usage. As we've mentioned, Cutler, not a friend of the show, he's just too grouchy for that, is really not playing well. And Devontae Parker is definitely suffering for that. Despite the fact he put up a few good weeks in the beginning, there's a chance we see Chad Henning, and that is a kiss of death to Devontae Parker's numbers. So if you can move Devontae Parker based on his numbers right now, do it and get out of that business before it goes down.
And before we have to go, we should talk a little bit about the WWE. The WWE had Hell in a Cell, and my quick commentary on that is I hate, and we've said it before, I loathe that now they're just branding pay-per-view events with the gimmicks when it used to be back in the day the gimmick was the payoff to a really great feud. Now it's like, let's just throw somebody in a Hell in a Cell because it's the month of Hell in a Cell. So with that in mind, I really wasn't that interested in it. I watched part of the women's match, the end of the Triple Threat United States Championship match, and I just read a recap of the main event. I believe you watched more of it than I did, but what were your thoughts, Franco?
I did watch all of it because we have 2 TV screens in my house because I have a wife that doesn't enjoy sports. So on Sunday, I was allowed to use both TV screens. So I had the game on one.
Nice.
And because I do my homework for this TV show. We're a lot of things, but never say we're not well prepared. So, I mean, the booking was super strange because the Usos and New Day have put on fantastic matches the last 3 pay-per-views. They've had them on the kickoff show, then they had him leading the card to open in one of the only other Hell in the Cell matches, which makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make that didn't make any sense to me either.
Yeah, so that was probably my favorite match of the night, if only because they were innovative in how they used the Hell in the Cell and they used tools and everything else. The problem with having a pay-per-view themed match is that everything's kind of been done before. Like, we've seen the guy go off top of the cage. We've seen all that. Finding ways to make the match fresh in the ring is the really key part, and they did a really good job of that. And then the next best match on the card was the second match, which was the U.S. Triple Threat. And that probably should have been the leadoff match to build towards the night. But the rest of the card was utterly forgettable. The main event was Shane McMahon doing the same exact match he's done in a cell. Not even Kevin Owens could kind of save it. It did have an interesting turn of events at the end of the match, but that's really it. We could have skipped 15 minutes and just done that and been done with it.
That's why I think it's I think they need to retire this system, because it does. You're right. It was weird. It was like, oh, Shane fell off the cage again. Where I'm like, oh no, that's still incredible and insane that he's doing it. It's just that you're right. We've seen that spot at WrestleMania. We've seen it so many times lately now since he's come back, and also in his own career. That again, without that emotional payoff of here's why we need to be in Hell in a Cell, it doesn't work for me. I mean, their first match could have been in a cage match, and which is less intensive, and that might have been more interesting than trying to do a Hell in a Cell match. But I don't know, man. And then Nakamura lost again with Mahal still retaining the championship.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that whole thing fizzled out on both sides, Nakamura and Mahal. At this point, it's kind of like tried to build up Nakamura as this major threat, and now you've had him lose 3 times in a row. I think this is the 3rd time. So you can't possibly have him back as a challenger. It doesn't make any sense. He needs to get his momentum back again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was in a non-clean way, which is for non-wrestling fans. I mean, there was some tomfoolery or nonsense that led up to it, but they really botched that booking. Shocking. If it's not John Cena or someone that's very universally acceptable, they have a hard time dealing with that character. So
yeah,
hopefully he bounces back. But I can tell you, I'm not looking for the next pay-per-view, and I probably won't be too excited until we get to Royal Rumble again. So
yeah, and also FYI, next pay-per-view is in 2 weeks.
I know,
and it's TLC, and it's like, what? I don't understand this either. I think that is also killing them. That's shooting themselves in the foot. If you can't build the momentum for your Hell in a Cell, and then you're like, we got 2 weeks to start pushing TLC when you don't even have all the matches lined up, it's insane.
I wish they would just stay with the monthly model and alternate brands, and then that would give you a natural progression where you have four events per year where there's double brand, and just leave it at that instead of trying to pack 24 events into one space. And it's not like they have to do that anymore. It used to be with the old pay-per-view model. They did that to double their income because you had different events and fans buying them. Now with the network and subscription, they're not really gaining much by doing it. So I wish we go back to the old system. The sooner you do it, the better. Ring of Honor does it like that, and it works really well. Like I just think that'd be a better way to do it.
And also, just to one final note, if you look at Twitter, and you looked at the crowd, WWE should recognize it's not working out well, because the non-camera side was almost empty, and people were leaving during the Hell in a Cell match with Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens. So something's got to forgive. Anyway, Franco, what did you learn today?
I learned we're back for a 2nd season, and I learned that you can, in fact, wear a shirt with sleeves. Good job.
There we go.
What'd you learn?
I learned that season 2 is the season of bright shirts. I'm so excited. Season 2.
Boom.
Bright shirt season. Boom. For the BFF show, I'm Brendan.
I'm Franco.
Bye.
Peace.